Huge shout out to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Stick around till the end to learn more. Now, onto the video. Yes, and those were the days. You could buy a burger and beer for $1.50. 1984 was a warning rather than historical drama, and video games were good. Okay, maybe that's a bit harsh. Good games come out all the time, but the biggest of the big, the AAA titans, they aren't quite what they used to be, especially in the month of November 2021. The releases in this month specifically, I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. And this has brought me back to answering a question I used to get asked rather consistently. A question of, is the game industry going to crash again? You know, like it did in 1983. Will this lack of quality control the microtransactions and every problem in between? Will it just lead to lower interest in players and a grand collapse of it all? Okay, so in the late 70s, early 80s, the video game industry was divided between really two markets: home consoles and the arcade. PC gaming wasn't all that big, but these boxes, those were. Atari was on top. The 2600 had dominated the industry to a point where its market share was kind of meaningless. Also, it wasn't called the 2600 at the time, but it doesn't matter. Competition could sell a few million units at most, but the 2600 was kind of the entire industry. In the early days, Atari's management style under Nolan Bushnell, well, things were special. Countless stories of various parties and shenanigans regale what sounds to be a very laid-back atmosphere. There was no mandates from upper management. Developers just needed to work hard on whatever they were doing. There was no stipulation on what to make and how to make it. Just do your job and do it good. You didn't need a full team to make a game, just one person in a few months' time back in this era. Any marketing input would be vague recommendations for future titles. As time went on, the value of Atari rose. Bushnell sold the company to Warner, who brought in Ray Kazar. At first it wasn't too different, but over the course of a few years, the Atari of old was just no more. Now marketing agents would dictate what games needed to be made. Their critique of these games was based on no technical know-how. A commonly recited story is agents asking, why can't you make this square a circle? Licensing deals with movie studios and properties took precedent over everything else. A lot of money was being made. Fed-up devs would form their own groups, leave Atari, and start the competition. Stuff like Activision. The floodgates were opened, and devs inside wanted better treatment. And it was in Atari's best interest to fix this. This resulted in royalty checks, which at the time were quite significant. This created incentive to go along with marketing recommendations. Even if they were annoying, incomprehensible, or flat out impossible, playing ball could make you a millionaire in your early 20s. But there was a problem. See, the Atari 2600 had one significant flaw. There wasn't many standards in console development, and through clever reverse engineering, legal cases, and bad blood, eventually it was made so anybody could make a game for the platform, with or without Atari's permission. A lot of shovelware showed up very quickly, and in tandem, Atari's management became more keen on cashing in on those licensing deals. As more employees left, investors began investigating the true value of this new market, and it was apparent to them that Atari was raking in a bunch of cash. Other companies would want in on this, creating their own consoles and more competition. And considering these platforms would get even more shovelware, the market was somewhat diluted. Atari's management by this point had gone kinda crazy. We have stories of a 5-week development cycle mandated by Atari to develop E.T., a task taken on by Howard Scott Warshaw, who would go on to later write about pretty much all of this. E.T.'s poor reception did not kill the game industry, but as Warshaw says himself, it represented everything leading up to that 1983 crash. What resulted was a combination of shovelware, a mass influx of consoles, an overly corporate Atari that was no longer focused on quality, and the public just got fed up. Most consumers of games were parents buying them for their children. As these games got worse, kids quit asking for them. Parents got wise to what they perceived as a giant scam. I mean, now you needed a whole new box to play games, and there was less interest in not only home consoles, but every aspect of games. The global gaming industry, once worth $42 billion, had shrunk by just a third of that value in 3 years. The American console markets specifically had it the roughest, with revenue dropping a solid 97%. Nowadays, it's pretty easy to look at the 1983 crash as a perfect parallel to today. Executives who don't understand the product, marketing teams jumping the gun, pushing out games far too early to hit that critical holiday season. Quality is the least of anyone's concerns, as simply hitting shelves before Black Friday becomes essential. Shovelware oversaturation. When's this all gonna fall apart? Nah, that's not gonna happen. Comparing the video game industry of 2021 and 1983 is like comparing the mobile phone market of 2021 and 1983. If the entire console market collapsed tomorrow in spectacular fashion, nobody, not a single person ever buys a game for Nintendo or PlayStation or Xbox or any of these boxes again. The ramifications of that would still not hold a candle to the 83 crash, because only a third of the gaming market relies on this. If alongside this, PC gaming also collapsed, it still wouldn't be half of the total global game industry. The demographics of who buys these games is different. Rather than being parents buying games for their children, it's adults just buying games. I think we like to equate quality and success, but that's not often the case. A great game can sell horribly, and a terrible game can sell very, very well. This isn't always the case though. Sequels to games with less than ideal reception can suffer. Call of Duty Vanguard is the worst selling COD in a good long while. Within a mere 3 weeks of its launch during Black Friday, the once $70 version of the game had dropped to $40. Even after Black Friday, it's not at full MSRP. This is not normal, and combine this with the earlier than usual free-to-play weekends, it's easy to see that this game has not met Activision's sales expectations. On other fronts, Battlefield 2042 also launched to less than optimal reception, and while there's no concrete data yet on sales numbers, overall player count on Steam has dropped significantly. This game was definitely rushed by many months to hit this November target. Stuff like a scoreboard and voice chat are missing, but this is nothing compared to what might be the worst release in many years. It's CJ in GTA, and not okay. I'd argue that the GTA Definitive Edition is getting kinda close to that Atari bad level. Turns out when you take mobile code and you shove it in Unreal Engine and you have AI upscale all the textures, things can get a bit weird. And while all these titles will receive updates and have received updates to fix some of the issues, a large amount of the player base might not stick around to find out, but doesn't actually affect profits. That's the question. Here's EA's past year in share value. It's kinda wacky and it drops a lot and it rises, but it definitely doesn't show consistent growth like investors would want. Here's Take-Two, and here's Ubisoft. It's just going down. And then here is Activision. Yes, that is beautiful. Almost 40% in 6 months. That's an achievement right there, Bobby. Activision has done everything wrong here. In true Atari level failing, probably worse. And I'm not even just talking about the Cosby Room here, just that core business. They stopped developing any IP besides Call of Duty and the core Activision lineup. They killed those dev teams, and as always, fuck you, Bobby. Blizzard is in disarray with studio heads leaving constantly because of, actually, the Cosby Room. And other reasons, people want to just jump this ship. And that massive decline in share value, it's not just because of the news stories, it's also because a lot of the big upcoming titles are delayed indefinitely. November 2021 is the closest I've seen where people seem to unanimously agree things are worse. And that's a good thing. The reason these games particularly are in the state they are is probably Kyogre virus. Games take a lot of years to make, and during the year of 2020, development probably just stopped. Publishers were not willing to delay the titles and wanted to get them out in Q4 2021 no matter what. Given that the response has been lower sales and player engagement, I have to imagine executives might look at this and maybe think something's wrong. But yeah, even in times before the virus, games were made by these companies that committed egregious sins. People lose faith in companies, and some of them don't come back. And while it might be satisfying to see these companies get what's coming to them, another 1983-esque crash, well, I don't think it'll happen. Even if Activision was banned from all consoles, they just moved to mobile games and tell their investors that's where the money is. If Battlefield 2042 sells well, EA might just take this as, well, here's the new bar. This is what people want. In Take-Two, I mean, they don't give a shit. Look at this. In 1982, Atari was on top of the world. It was unstoppable. That ego and hubris just grew every year, and eventually people got fed up. The market as a whole was so fragile that nobody knew whether this video game thing was just a fad. And while that sounds crazy today, it was an entirely legitimate concern. When they fell, they took the rest of the industry with them. But nowadays, we have a lot more than just one king controlling it all. Atari had no competition, not really. They controlled the platform, and they could do whatever they wanted. Without that competition, there was no incentive to get better. And, well, yeah. It's possible what we're seeing right now is a downfall for these select companies. But even if EA, Activision, Take-Two, and say Ubisoft fell, they really represent just a mere fraction of not only the console and PC market, but the total gaming industry. I've fully given up on the notion that publishers can learn from mistakes. I mean, EA and Activision have had issues for decades. Take-Two, yeah.
I'll catch up with you.
Okay, but even if they all go down, it won't take everybody else out. It won't collapse the whole industry. Titans rise and fall all the time. Roblox is worth more than Activision. And at one point, Konami made video games. They had awful policies, truly the worst. And then they just left. They disappeared. No more games. Those were good times. And then they came back, and they made this, and nobody plays it. So see, at least we do have some standards. Squarespace gives people a powerful and beautiful online platform from which to create your own website. Connect with your audience and generate revenue through gated members-only content. Manage your members, send email communications, and leverage audience insights. All on one easy-to-use platform. You can create your own community on the site with the fully integrated commenting system. Yes, likes, replies, and comments are all here. Powerful blogging tools allow you to schedule posts as well. With various extensions, you can manage inventory, promote products, streamline bookkeeping, and more. Display posts from other social media platforms on your site automatically updated for you. Go to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/knowledgehub to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Link is in the description. Go check it out.